And with regards to the Middle East, what do you recommend that Biden does in his first 100 days? Will that Iran deal be part of the first 100 days in office?
Our hope is that it's not, and I think for a number of reasons. One is, of course, the original deal was deeply flawed and left open many troubling questions about Iranian proliferation and its quest for nuclear weapons. But also, it's important to note that domestically, it was one of the most divisive foreign policy initiatives in recent memory. And so, if the goal of President Biden right now is to begin to heal a country that has been divided and fractured over the last 4 years, if not longer, it does raise the question of why to rush back into a deal like this when it was so controversial, where it will invoke the ire of middle of the road Republicans, not to mention many of our allies abroad who are still stinging from some of the foreign policy decisions taken by either Obama or Trump. If this is in fact going to be a healing presidency, it certainly would make sense to wait for conditions to ripen before taking any steps in this direction.
Now, we know that new President Joe Biden has a lot on his agenda. How high is dealing with Iran?
I think it's high. I think it remains to be seen exactly where it stands in the list of priorities. One gets a sense today, for example, the first statement coming out of the State Department related to Libya. So that obviously points to a question of whether the Eastern Med is rising as a priority for the United States. We heard quite a bit about China and the great power competition. And we heard from Janet Yellen, the incoming Treasury Secretary, that she intends to use all of the powers at her disposal to counter China's trade practices. So that, I think, figures to be a top priority. There is, of course, the question of the Abraham Accords and building on the diplomacy that was very much successful undertaken by Donald Trump. And the Biden administration has indicated that it wishes to continue to pursue this kind of diplomacy. And that's, of course, not controversial at all. Again, Iran figures to be a controversial issue. And one does have to wonder whether it's worth the kind of pain and the challenges that will certainly be part of the picture invariably. At some point, you know, the debate will heat back up. We'll go right back to where we were before the Trump administration. The arguments that were taking place around the Iran deal, around sanctions relief, around engaging with the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism, one's got to imagine that this should be a warning, I think, to an administration that has so many other challenges on its plate and many other things that it could prioritize should it wish to.
Do you anticipate that more countries will sign normalization agreements or peace deals with Israel under a Biden administration?
I do. I think there are a number of other countries that are likely ripe for this, and some that are less ripe, but that are still at least indicating a potential willingness to move forward. Oman, for example, another country in the Arabian Gulf that is very much already speaking with Israel. There are even rumors of the Qataris, now that they have re-engaged with the Gulf Cooperation Council, and they already have some ties with Israel, they may be considering this. We hear from Israelis that African nations that are Muslim majority or plurality populations, that they may be interested in engaging. Countries in East Asia as well. So I think we see lots of opportunities for peace. The question really will be, I think, about the terms. Number one, the sort of quid pro quo that we saw from the Trump administration, more of a transactional approach to diplomacy. I don't think we're going to see that with the Biden administration as much. I think that's one part of it. The other part of it that we're watching very carefully is the question of how much this administration is going to prioritize the Palestinian narrative again. The fact that the Trump administration was deprioritizing this narrative, I think, was seen as something of a green light for the Arab states to speak more openly about normalization. But if they see from the United States, from their major patron, that they really are focusing once again on the Palestinian grievances and the Palestinian narrative, it actually may serve as a deterrent to additional diplomacy I think it would be a shame. I think there is an opportunity here to walk and chew gum, as we say, where you can pursue both diplomacy with Arab states as well as keeping a dialogue going with the Palestinians. There's no reason to preclude one while focusing on the other. They can do both. The question is now, how do they do both and continue to encourage the kind of diplomacy that we've seen to the extent that Donald Trump did with great success?